The tampon king gets back in the ring. I speak of former VP nominee Tim Walz. He joined Beto O'Rourke at a Texas town hall last night, and the estrogen levels were enough to give Chuck Norris menstrual cramps. I wonder, is our strength our diversity?
Our strength is our diversity. We've been talking about this for years as a country of immigrants, and we let them define the issue on immigration. We let them define the issue on D&I.
But I'm thinking there's only one explanation for Tim spewing nonsense like this. Time of the month.
What happens when a politician full of pride gets dragged across live TV like yesterday's leftovers? You get Tim Walz losing his cool after Greg Gutfeld absolutely wrecks him in front of millions. Gutfeld didn't just criticize Walz, he demolished him like a wrecking ball through a house of glass. The moment was explosive as Gutfeld described Walz's leadership like a comedy sketch gone horribly wrong. He mocked Walz's confused style, saying it was like watching a man search for his Prius in a Target parking lot for 3 days straight. With each jab, Gutfeld made it clear. Walz wasn't leading, he was lost with a map drawn in crayon. The crowd couldn't stop laughing when Gutfeld called him a gluten-free piñata at a meat lover's cookout. Every sentence hit like a slap as Gutfeld accused Walz of turning Minnesota into a circus without a tent or direction. He went in hard, saying Walz's decision-making looked like bureaucratic interpretive dance, awkward, confusing, and pointless.
Tim Walz continues to be criticized for embellishing his rank and service. After it came out over the weekend, he once claimed to be an official bikini inspector. Walz's direct superior in the National Guard says Walz knew his unit was about to deploy to Iraq and went behind the back of his superior officer to resign. When reached for comment, Walz yelled, "Hey, look over there," and then ran away. Although Walz's actions look bad to veterans, Dems say these revelations could really help him win the coward vote.
Gutfeld's roasting had no breaks. He compared the state's leadership to a failed art project that nobody asked for. Then came the fireworks. Gutfeld pulled out Walz's old embarrassing claims about being an official bikini inspector. The crowd gasped at the ridiculous claim. As Gutfeld laughed, "That's not even a good lie." Things got worse when he brought up how Walz allegedly ducked out of his military duty just before deployment. Reports say Walz resigned, quietly going around his commanding officer to escape serving in Iraq. Gutfeld didn't let that slide. He shouted, "That's not leadership, that's strategic cowardice." According to his superior, Walz vanished from duty like a ghost just when his team needed him the most. When pressed for answers, Walz reportedly yelled, "Hey, look over there," before making a break for it like a cartoon villain. Veterans aren't laughing. They say Walz's actions may earn him votes from people afraid of their own shadows. Gutfeld turned up the heat, claiming Walz's approval rating was colder than a Minnesota snowman in January. He slammed Walz with another insult, calling him lukewarm mashed potatoes at a buffet nobody remembers touching. Gutfeld wasn't done. He revved up his sarcasm like a chainsaw, slicing through every ounce of Walz's political image with wild energy. Gutfeld compared Walz's so-called leadership to a kid's art project gone wrong. Messy, chaotic, and something everyone pretends to like just to avoid hurting feelings. He ripped into Walz's decisions, saying they were like finger painting with expired mayonnaise, gross, pointless, and a total waste of time. Then came the brutal takedown over Walz's attempt to defend himself.
Saw just recently Donald Trump's executive order to make it more difficult, specifically to women, trying to make it more difficult for women to be able to vote. We see one of the first things they do is try and restrict the vote.
Wait, so Trump is making it more difficult for women to vote? How so? Math problems? But it's further proof that the most dangerous thing for a leftist is a follow-up question, which is why you never hear any. But I guess questioning elections is okay now. But the best moment came when Walz forgot who he is.
Gutfeld didn't hold back, laughing as he said, Walz used his military background to hide from responsibility. Walz once tried to claim he wasn't drunk during a wild night, blaming his behavior on a service-related misunderstanding, and Gutfeld called it out instantly. He didn't fail the drunk test, Gutfeld shouted. He just misheard the instructions. The audience exploded with laughter. Reports say Walz was driving over 100 miles per hour and blew an alcohol level that raised eyebrows even in bars. But during his campaign, he insisted he was completely sober. Gutfeld mocked him, saying he rewrote history faster than a reality show contestant covering their tracks. Gutfeld stared into the camera and said, "This guy doesn't take responsibility for anything, not even his own breathalyzer." Then came the snitch line drama. Walz created a hotline for reporting others, but hid his own offenses like they never happened. He wants you to tattle, but he won't even admit when he messes up himself. Gutfeld roared. The audience was in tears as Gutfeld shouted, "You can't spell hypocrisy without Walz." Then he threw another punch. This is the same guy who pushed lies about something creepy on a couch, then acts shocked when people call him creepy himself. "Let's be honest," Gutfeld said. Walz gives off the vibe of a guy who writes diary entries about scented candles and power. He even joked that Walz is the kind of guy who gets confused by a handshake, awkward, slow, and stiff like cardboard. Watching Walz lead Minnesota, Gutfeld said, is like watching a substitute teacher try to control a room full of caffeinated raccoons. He talks like someone who read a leadership book once and now thinks he's a general, Gutfeld snapped. Gutfeld painted a vivid picture. Walz with a whiteboard that says feelings and a kazoo, stumbling into every debate like it's his first day. "He begged to be roasted," Gutfeld exclaimed. "He walked into this with glitter glue and a ribbon that says, 'I tried.'"
Walz is a strange dude.
Oh, he's strange.
He is strange. Him and I are the same age. How does he look so much younger?
No, he's a strange guy.
It's strange.
You know, he called up years ago. I was in the White House, and he said, "My house is being surrounded by people with American flags." I said, "Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" He said, "I think they're going to attack me." This was during the riots and everything else. They were MAGA people. You know, they like the American flag, all right? And they also had Trump. And I said, "How do you know?" There were about 15,000. He said, "Could you put out a word like that I'm your friend?" I don't even know him, but that's the only time I ever spoke to him. And if you look back long ago, tweets before truth, tweets, long ago, I put out a statement. He's a good man, the governor. He's on our side. I didn't know him, but I didn't want him to get hurt. And everybody put down their flags and they left. Yes. He said it was a miracle. He said it was a miracle.
Gutfeld then turned to Walz's pandemic record, calling it a real-life audition for the role of supreme shutdown master. He closed churches and fined bar owners, but called protests essential, Gutfeld said. "What kind of science fiction health plan is that?" Gutfeld couldn't help himself. "You shut down bingo night, but left the streets wide open for anyone waving a puppet with a slogan?" He declared that Walz's health strategy wasn't science. It was interpretive theater with a government badge. Gutfeld wasn't done. He shifted to Walz's wide-eyed debate performance, calling it emotional intensity that looked more like panic than passion. One commentator said Walz's eyes showed deep concern, but Gutfeld rolled footage and asked, Does this look like a man ready to lead or a man trying to remember his Wi-Fi password? He zoomed in on the awkward moment, saying even deer in headlights were screaming at Walz to move out of the way. The roasting didn't stop there. Gutfeld compared giving Walz a state surplus to handing a toddler a credit card. Tell him to only buy essentials, Gutfeld said, and suddenly the budget's gone, and all we have are glitter pens and interpretive murals. Minnesota's tax dollars vanished into vague programs, expensive retreats, and awkward government artwork of Walz staring at clouds. Red tape isn't just back, Gutfeld said. It's now an Olympic sport in Minnesota, and Walz is going for gold. He even joked that lemonade stands now needed 14 permits and a personal identity statement before selling anything on a sidewalk. Gutfeld called it Soviet Minnesota, just with softer fonts and worse results. Then came the ultimate jab. Walz labeled Donald Trump a wannabe dictator, and Gutfeld nearly choked on the irony. This from the guy who shut down your Sunday potluck but greenlit mass street protests with zero restrictions, he asked. During the pandemic, Walz punished business owners for opening their doors but applauded massive gatherings with slogans. Gutfeld's voice dripped with sarcasm as he described it as political virus control.
Exploited his military background to cover up his crime. He said it was related to his service and that he actually wasn't drunk. He just misheard the instructions in the drunk test. He blew a super high level. It was like, 0.2, driving 100 miles an hour. And then when he's running for office, he said that he wasn't drunk. I mean, this guy has creep written all over it. He created a snitch line, but lies about his personal infractions. He doesn't even own up to it. This is a guy who pushes a hoax about a sex on a couch, and then the closer you look at him, he's a creepy cuck.
Meanwhile, Kamala's VP, Tim Walz, is being accused of lying about his rank, which is called stolen valor. But in Walz's defense in Minneapolis, stealing is legal. But misrepresenting your past for political gain? I don't see that as a problem, said one woman.
Where your party decides if you're safe or not. The footage then cut to Walz giving a dramatic speech, declaring Trump to be weak and cruel, to which Gutfeld replied, "Projecting much?" Even Trump chimed in, saying Walz once called him scared because people with American flags were outside his house. He told me to put out a statement saying I was his friend, Trump said. I didn't even know him. Gutfeld smirked and added, "Now that's courage, calling for backup from a guy you've never met because people were waving flags." The mockery snowballed as Gutfeld described Walz's obsession with Gavin Newsom like a fanboy chasing a bad idea across state lines. He asked, does Walz really look at California's disasters and think, yes, but colder and with more potholes? Gutfeld described Walz as the love child of Bernie Sanders and a malfunctioning stoplight, loud, confused, and stuck on red. As the crowd laughed, he leaned in and said, he's not governing. He's play-acting with a TED Talk voice and IKEA instructions. Every time Walz tried to make a point, Gutfeld showed a clip that only made things worse, highlighting the growing gap between reality and rhetoric. Gutfeld then pulled out a giant map of Minnesota, circling the Twin Cities with a red marker and labeling it, "Here be carjackings." He compared Walz's public safety plan to a mall security guard trying to stop a riot with a kazoo and clipboard. Criminals aren't scared of his policies, Gutfeld said. They're confused by them, and then they walk away laughing. The statistics flashed across the screen like warning lights. Robberies up, assaults rising, and law enforcement struggling to keep up. If Walz handled national security, Gutfeld quipped. We'd all be brushing up on Russian by next week. When the topic turned to education, Gutfeld didn't hesitate. He called it performance art, wrapped in buzzwords and glitter glue. He mocked Minnesota's curriculum, saying, "The only test students pass now is how fast they get offended."
I'm especially talking about these old white guys who seem to disappoint us on a regular basis in this country.
Dude. You're an old white guy. And you're right, you are a huge disappointment. I guess hating himself is the first thing he's nailed correctly. Because Waltz saying old white men suck isn't a political stance, it's his confession. Waltz calling people old and white is like Maxine Waters making fun of someone for shopping at Wigs R Us. He wants to execute more DEI policies, and Trump wants to execute murderous gang members. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Can you see the difference?
Then came a clip of Walz criticizing older white men in leadership, which Gutfeld paused for effect. He looked directly into the camera and said, "Dude, you're an old white guy." The audience laughed hard as Gutfeld added, "This may be the first time Walz has told the truth. He's finally criticizing himself." He compared Walz's comment to Maxine Waters, criticizing someone for shopping at the same wig store she uses. Gutfeld shook his head and said, "It's not politics, it's projection with a podium." As the heat rose, he slammed Walz's DEI obsession, contrasting it with Trump's focus on removing violent criminals. "Tim wants more bureaucrats with PowerPoints," Gutfeld said. "Trump wants more police with handcuffs." Then came a deep dive into Walz's pandemic orders again. He shut down family-run bars, but called massive demonstrations spiritually necessary. Gutfeld said, apparently the virus knew the difference between chanting and church singing. He replayed old footage of Walz defending his selective shutdowns, then cut to footage of boarded-up businesses and empty schools. It wasn't about safety, Gutfeld argued. It was about power, and who got to keep it. He even mocked Politico's analysis that said Walz's wide eyes showed passion and intensity. "What emotion is that?" Gutfeld asked, freezing the screen. "He looks like he just saw the bill for his own policies." The crowd howled as Gutfeld leaned in and whispered, "This is the face of a man who bought glitter instead of groceries." His delivery was merciless. Each clip, another nail. Each punchline, another spark. Gutfeld kept going, turning what was supposed to be a political discussion into a full-blown roast. He said giving Walz control over Minnesota's budget was like handing a raccoon your wallet and expecting it to come back with groceries. Every dollar disappeared into vague programs, diversity retreats, and empty slogans dressed up like real policy. The audience laughed when Gutfeld asked, "Where's the money going?" Then answered, "Probably into another mural of Walz, looking serious under dramatic lighting."
So the tone of the media was one of sadness, not reporting Walz's loss, but mourning it. Now, the truth is that a VP debate is like a colonoscopy. It's important and necessary, but that doesn't mean you want to watch it.
Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
Yeah. Even a deer in the headlights is screaming, "Get the out of the way, dude!" It's no wonder they don't do follow-up questions with Democrats. They're like the top layer of day-old skimpy bean dip. What's underneath, you don't want to see.
Walz pitched the train as a modern solution, but Gutfeld called it Elon Musk fan fiction on rusty tracks. As the camera zoomed in, Gutfeld laid it out clearly. Why invest in a train to nowhere when your state can't even patch a pothole? Then the segment turned eerie. Gutfeld pointed out that while Walz talked equity, crime kept climbing and businesses kept leaving. He asked, "What's the point of a community if everyone's too scared to go outside after dark?" Viewers saw stats flash across the screen. Empty storefronts, rising taxes, families moving across the border to South Dakota. Gutfeld's expression turned serious as he said, "This isn't progress, it's managed collapse," with a smile. And when the subject of stolen valor came back, the room went silent. Walz allegedly misrepresented his military rank, and now voters were demanding answers. Gutfeld said, "You can't fake honor. You can't Photoshop courage. People know when you've lied about the uniform." He added that in Minnesota, stealing is practically legal in some places, but stealing trust is still unforgivable. As the crowd applauded, Gutfeld finished with one last comparison. Walz is like a magic 8-ball in orthopedic shoes. Shake him, and all you get is a confusing answer about bike lanes and equity gardening. No resolution, no clarity, just noise wrapped in big government slogans. And as the camera pulled back, the message was clear. Greg Gutfeld didn't just criticize Tim Walz. He shredded every excuse, every deflection, and every hollow promise with surgical sarcasm. This wasn't just a roast. It was a political demolition.